Okay, a couple things that I want to share. I want to show you something from um, Pope Francis in his Day of Creation of Care or Month of Creation of Care. This is something that I believe I've shown in videos before, but I can't remember exactly, or at least I can't remember which video it was in. But you can probably find it on the channel if you look through it. And um, what I noticed it last night, but I wanted to take some time to think more about it, and I still have to do more thinking and more digging, and because I'm just really curious about why he chose the month of September, and I'm just going to play some of this and let you hear some of it.
At his general audience, Pope Francis recalled that September 1st is World Day of Prayer for the Care of Creation, a day he established in 2015 to coincide with the Orthodox Church's special day of prayer for the planet.
Oggi celebriamo la giornata mondiale di preghiera per la cura del creato e l'inizio del tempo del creato, che si concluderà il 4 ottobre, festa di San Francesco di Assisi. Quest'anno il tema è Una casa per tutti?
All right, now that's probably good enough. So one of the things that I wanted to point out too is that he says that this year's theme is a home for all, or the renewing God's dwelling place. God's dwelling place is in our hearts, is in His church, in people. But of course, Rome changes that. They change that to Mother Earth, because they're actually pagan. And um, it, there's a lot that I want to get into when it comes to Rome and also the history with Islam, in that they are actually more connected than people realize, and also that Rome doesn't actually have just one capital. Or at least it didn't have one capital. I have to see if it's still the case now. But, this is some research that I have to do. I just wanted to show everybody this. And before I get to the other thing that I wanted to briefly talk about, um, but yeah, the question that I was looking for specifically regarding this is that why September? Um, and I think my suspicion is, of course, is it's all about Mother Earth or the divine feminine, but like my suspicion is that he is choosing it because of the constellation Virgo, and during the month of September, you have some interesting things happen in Virgo in here. Well, just reading through a little bit of this, I know there's an alignment with Venus and the Moon. Both of those are um, related to, the Queen of Heaven, but also Jupiter, the King planet, is, I believe that is inside the constellation Virgo. But I also believe, I don't think it'll be here. I don't think it'd be listed here. But let me see. Yeah, I had to get this picture from good old Steve Fletcher, that guy who used to create a bunch of false rapture dates and stuff. This is probably just ignore where the picture came from, and just it's just an illustration. Um, but the point is that there's a lot of things happening in Virgo this month, and that's why I'm thinking he's making this Day of Creation of Care, even though this is actually 6 years old now. It's not really even new. He created it in 2015, like I said. Um, but so you also have during this month, you have the sun on 9/11. You have the sun rising in Virgo, and there are a couple other interesting facts about the month of let me pause this and get those images really quick. Okay, this was a screenshot that I made for a video a couple years ago called Proving Allah is ISIS. Um, so one of the images that I had, this one in particular that you're looking at, says that the Statue of Freedom that is on the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. is the largest of many goddesses located around Washington, D.C. And on the autumn equinox in September, she stares into the rising sun as it is stationed at the end of the zodiac sign of Virgo. All right, I got the next one. The next picture says September. Oh, and yeah, and there's the source. I put the source at the bottom of the page, and that was from City of the Goddess, Freemasons, the Sacred Feminine, and the Secret beneath the seat of power in Washington D.C. It's been a while since I read that book. So September 18th, 1793, the cornerstone of the U.S. Capitol building is laid, and that was actually from History.com, but from the book it says on that very Wednesday, the day most associated with the sign of Virgo, September 18th, at 3:30 a.m., a near full moon was about to set, leaving Venus in the east for about 2 hours. As the brightest object in the sky, all while the sun was firmly positioned in the sign of Virgo. So yeah, September definitely has significance because of the sun rising in Virgo, and also probably because Jupiter, the king planet, being in Virgo, and there's a lot of things that have to do with the celestial virgin birthing something. I'm thinking that's why the Pope has set this up to be in this day, the day of creation of care for creation, whatever, to be in September. And I'm sorry for just butchering this video. I'm not a very good speaker. I've been getting better lately since I've been using scripts, and that practice basically has made me a better speaker a little. I still struggle. But so that was that. Now for this other thing, there's a question that is probably on a number of people's minds. People who have looked at Genesis 3:16 and wondered what it meant when God proclaimed that the woman her desire would be to her husband. Now, when I read that, before I had even began studying anything about Babylon, I always believed that thy desire shall be to thy husband. Let me get the exact verse. Zoom in. I always thought that maybe this was saying that the things that you wanted or the things that you desired will go to your husband. So it was like I understood it that Eve would desire something like money or power, but those things would go to her husband. That's the way I read it. But recently, about a couple months ago, I've come to understand it a different way, in that thy desire shall be to thy husband actually has to do with it's the desire to rule over. It's the desire to put someone in subjection. So Eve's desire would be to make her husband subject to her. And there was a commentary written. I can't pronounce this person's name. I'm sorry. Let me scroll up to the top. Irvin A. Bucinitz. That's probably right. In his commentary, he says that he basically believes that the desire is one of intimacy, not a lust, but a desire for the woman, that the woman has to be intimate. And let me find that point later on here. Okay, down here it says, I'm going to continue reading this person's commentary. It says, even though the unity with man would bring woman to the threshold of death itself in the process of childbirth, yet woman would still possess a strong desire to be with man. The broken intimacy and the pain in childbearing would not be allowed to nullify the yearning of a woman for man. I gotta learn to turn my phone off when doing this. In the fulfillment of God's command to populate the earth, or to alter the divine order of the headship of man. So the broken intimacy and the pain in childbearing would not be allowed to nullify the yearning of a woman for man in the fulfillment of God's command to populate the earth, or to alter the divine order headship of a man. So he's saying that this is what it's saying in Genesis 3:16. But I would disagree with that point of view. And actually, I should continue reading that a little bit more. I will do that. It is equally continuous to maintain that the phrase "He shall rule over you" was given because Eve had usurped authority over the leadership role of Adam when she took and ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The sin of the first woman was not that she took the lead without seeking prior counsel from Adam, counsel of Adam. No such prior consultation was needed, for she herself knew God's commandment prohibiting them from eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The woman's sin was that she exalted herself above her Creator. She took it upon herself to determine, together with the counsel of the serpent, who I believe was another woman, if God's laws was good or bad, if it was right or wrong. Her sin had nothing to do with denying Adam his rightful role of leadership in the marriage or grasping a role that belonged to her husband. The only role that Eve usurped was that of God's, a usurpation that is characteristic of all sin in all people living in all times in the history of mankind. But okay, like I was about to say though, I do disagree that he, with his point about Eve's punishment being only for childbirth and not actually related to a desire to rule over her husband. So as they said, it was just an intimacy. It would be expressed as an intimacy for her husband that the pain of childbirth would not um, mitigate, or that it would not break. But when you look at Genesis 4, I already had it highlighted and I still skipped over it. The broken intimacy and the pain of childbearing will not be allowed to nullify the yearning of woman for man. But when you look at Genesis 4, you see the same language being used with Cain and sin, where it says, "If thou doest well, or doest well, shalt thou not be accepted? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him." Now, sin wanted to rule over Cain, and that's why when you see this comma, it's almost there's a direct sort of contradiction or a direct comparison being made between what's on this side of the comma and what's on that side of the comma. Same as with Genesis chapter 3:16. It says, "And thy desire shall be to thy husband," on one side of the comma, and on the other side of the comma, "and he shall rule over thee," to sort of establish that they're talking about the same thing. It's about rulership. It's about who rules or who bears the leadership. And we don't mean it in some, or the Bible doesn't mean it in some sort of barbaric sort of the man should dominate his wife or dominate women, because that's not true at all. And if anybody ever commands you to do something that's against what God ordains, you don't have to follow that order anyway. That goes for men and women. You don't follow orders that break God's laws. But I think it's further reinforced by 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 11 through 15, where the Apostle Paul says, "Let the woman learn in silence with all subjection. But I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence." For then he jumped straight into Adam and Eve. I think Um, his I think his mention of Adam and Eve takes us directly back to this moment. If thy desire shall be to thy husband, he shall rule over thee. Now, for Adam was first formed, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in the transgression. Notwithstanding, she shall be saved in childbearing, if they continue in faith, in charity, in holiness, and sobriety. Now, when I look at BlueLetterBible.com, because I'm always interested in seeing what this says, mostly because people say that Paul was a misogynist or whatever when he wasn't. Um, he I forgot her name. I can't remember her name, but one lady in the church. I'm going to get her name. Let me find it. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm just not going to be able to find that name right now. But there was a woman that was had a role in the church, and she had a voice. I put it that way. She had a voice. So it wasn't like Paul was just completely shutting down all women in the church. But what was going on back in those days, what we have to understand is that it's not like it is now, especially here in America, uh, or if you live in America. But back then, you had pagan religions were still pretty dominant, were probably not pretty dominant, they were dominant. And women took the lead, and the majority, I would say probably all of it, because they were seen as the more spiritual and they had the connection to the goddess who typically, especially in the mystery religions, was the higher power. The goddess was. And so you had to go through the diva or the temple prostitute or the priestess, high priestess, to get to the goddess. And so they were, the oracles and the leaders basically, and they could be loud and unruly if those type of women had come into the church, they wouldn't be in subjection. And when you look at where Paul says, "Let the women be in silence and subjection," when you actually look at the meaning of those words, and you can just look at the context too. He doesn't mean it like in a brutish kind of way, but just look at the definition, and he's talking about quietness, and that describes the life of a person, of one who stays at home doing his own work and does not officiously meddle with the affairs of others. In other words, they're not unruly, they're not loud, they're not boisterous, they're not out of order, basically, not out of order. Um, I think that's what is being described here. And so let's look at the other word that was used. He used the word subjection, the act of subjecting or obedience, to be in quietness and obedience. And that is what um, God has appointed to be the role of the wife, not to usurp authority over the man. But let's be fair here. Not all men are godly. You can't follow what every man says. In that case, you follow God. Do what God tells you to do. And that, I believe, is pretty much all I wanted to say. I'm sorry that went on pretty long. But before I end the video, let me also just say that everything that I say on this channel is, of course, my opinion. I may believe some of this is right, some of this is true, but at the end of the day, I am just a man. I am just a person on the internet, just like you. And the word says, "Let God be true and every man a liar." You need to search the scriptures yourself to see if these things be so. And I'm not telling you to believe anything that I say or to take anything that I say as the truth and to believe it. I'm just here sharing with you my thoughts, and that's it, nothing more. I'm just as capable of being wrong as anybody. So that's definitely all I have to say. So thank you all for watching the video, and may our Lord Jesus Christ bless you.
Are you hearing this, friends? They are in this together, okay? Pope Francis is very warm and cozy, promoting, behind, supporting the United Religions Initiative. Okay, so if you recall from my last video, One World Religion is Here, I pointed out an article that was from, it was called an Interfaith Report from COG Interfaith Report. And at first, I didn't know what it was. It was just talking about the affiliation between Pope Francis and the United Religions Initiative. And I said I wasn't sure what the site was. I thought, was that Church of God? I didn't know. But then I noticed at the end of the article that the writer was all for Pope Francis and just he was the greatest Christian. And isn't it interesting how the term Christian is, the world now believes that it applies to Catholicism? It absolutely does not. It is not a Christian faith. It is a false doctrine. However, when I researched that more, I thought I want to know what this website is, the COG Interfaith Report. So I clicked on the COG logo or About Us, and guess what I saw? Click. The Covenant of the Goddess is what COG stands for. This is an organization that is very involved. It's the largest witches coven, I think, in the world. I don't know, but you can research that. Very involved in the United Religions Initiative. And if you click on some of these things down here, you can see all of the pentagram, the satanic things. I mean, I got chills when I clicked this and saw that this is who's in bed, no pun intended, with the whore of the Mystery Babylon. And this is really, really bad, folks.